Good evening once again, folks. This is Robert Vaughn and Alex Jewell, and welcome to the DeFi Collective, where we discuss all things relative to decentralized finance. We're going to be discussing some very relevant issues today. We're going to talk a little bit about Facebook. Are they out of control or are they in control? We're going to talk a little bit about worker co-ops and DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. And we'll explain to you what those are and how and what they mean to you. We feel it's important when we go over information. Some of it may be new, some of it may be old, but like my history professor said, I said, well, the War of 1812 was blah blah blah. I said, well, that's the nature? What was significance? So we want to tell you the nature of some of these things and also how they relate to you and what they mean to you. We'll talk about decentralized social media. Social tokens and what the metaverse look like. We're going to get going. So let's go ahead and we'll get started. I just want to talk about a DAO, which is decentralized autonomous organization. It's an organization represented by rules. These rules are encoded as a computer program that's transparent. That means everybody has access to it. Everybody can see it. And controlled by the organization members and not influenced by central government. So it will be an organization that is really sort of like a business democracy where all the participants get to vote on what the organization does, how the organization spends money, so how much people get paid, so on and so forth, which is very similar to a worker co-op. Worker co-op is defined as a values-driven business that puts worker and community benefit at the core of its purpose. The two central characteristics of a worker co-op are workers own the business and they participate in its financial success on the basis of their labor contribution to the cooperative. So if Amazon was a worker co-op, instead of getting 17 bucks an hour, you might get 180 grand a year. Or working in a warehouse, because everything that came in would be divided up.
You might get a pay break.
To the labor. Yeah. A lot of people like worker co-ops, and we might as well start off with those. Workers have representation on and vote for the board of directors, adhering to the principle of one worker, one vote. In addition to their economic governance, workers also manage the day-to-day operations. Worker co-ops may be something you haven't heard a lot about. They exist in the United States, Italy, Spain, France, Brazil, and many other countries. Brazil has the most. They have 2.5 times as many member-owned companies as they do shareholders. So that's interesting that they, so it seems, where you are is not the center of the universe necessarily. There are a lot of things happening. Sometimes we think it is,
Imagine that.
Yeah. There are a lot of things happening around the world that maybe happened there before they happen here. So I'm going to turn it over to Alex, Mr. Worker Co-op, and let him talk a little bit about worker co-ops, how they fit into the decentralized finance space, and what the significance of them is to you personally. Go ahead, Alex. The floor is yours.
Sure. Yeah, it's always crazy when Americans realize, like, a lot of Americans' excuses for why we can't do things is because, oh, well, that's not America, right? We can't do something here because that other place isn't America, which I think is so funny. Like, we have some sort of proprietary, things that work elsewhere would definitely not work here, of course. But the reality is that we've had a lot of progress throughout history, especially earlier in the 20th century, in this country around worker organization. I mean, we kind of define this model of unions, and unions worked really well. Like, you have weekends and you have, minimum wage, and you have certain benefits and securities and laws and child labor laws and things. All of these are, and federal holidays, all of these are thanks to unionization, right? And of course, you have instances of unionization that's become corrupt.
Have healthcare coverage. healthcare coverage.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
just, amazing worker benefits, because workers organized and they said, you know what, we're not going to work if we don't negotiate. And then they organized as workers around some sort of organization of their own, a union, in order to demand those. And we see that still working today. I mean, Oreo and Nabisco really held out recently with with the strike, but they gave in, even though they kept, worker companies always do this, but they kept like announcing like, we're fine, we don't need all these workers. But then you had the railroad workers holding up ingredients on the tracks, not even delivering ingredients to Oreo. And then Oreo was like, uh-oh. And so you see the importance of worker organization, even in our culture, right? So what is it, how does it work to have a worker co-op, And it's, right now, people kind of imagine co-ops as worker co-ops as like some middle of the desert thing in Arizona, where if you fail at everything else, you end up in this, in the desert at some co-op, digging up holes. But the reality is that you can have very successful companies where you have people in specific leadership roles, but they don't own more or have like more power necessarily than the collective as a whole, right?
Unless the collective says so.
Right. Unless you have
make a decision that, well, Alex knows a little bit more about finance.
Right.
And maybe that's a little bit more, and he should maybe get paid a little bit more.
Right. And so do we have an issue where CEOs on average make 370 times the amount of their workers? That's a major issue of centralization, right? And centralized power. Mm-hmm. So you look at a company like Dan Price with Gravity Payments that we've talked about before, where Dan Price makes 70K and the lowest he pays any of his employees is 70K. And they've grown significantly as a result. At some point, during the pandemic, he thought that they only had a few months left as a company. Everybody agreed together to take a pay cut temporarily for a few months. Well, that worked so well that they've all been paid back for the pay cuts they took, and they're back at the 70K minimum. And then all the workers got together and bought him a Tesla. And so,
that doesn't happen too often.
I mean, people look at this. How do you look at that scenario of this company that succeeded really well? I wouldn't say they're technically a co-op or they're technically a decentralized organization of any kind, but they have a lot of these similarities in terms of proving a proof of concept, right? Where he's still CEO, he still does CEO things, he still represents the company, he's still a figurehead. But he doesn't make more or have more control over the company than the rest of the people. And he is perfectly happy being part of an organization that does that. And it works. And I don't understand. A lot of people look at that and they get angry about it for some reason, like he's broken capitalism by not taking advantage of it. But it's a great proof of concept. Companies like this, and ones in Brazil, and it shows that all you essentially need, all that makes up a company is workers, right? There's workers who have different jobs. Maybe there's workers who, run projects or run products, make, higher level decisions as liaisons between different stakeholders or different teams that have to work together. But if you have those people playing those roles without being power hungry and without the politics and without the centralized control that screws over everybody else, and you have everybody as an equal vote in that system, it's a much better system.
It is, yeah. And it's funny because workers know how to run a company much better than the CEOs know how to run a company. I had a job as a production manager, and I had about 150 employees. It was in a plant. Transmission plant. And so I had to make sure that we hit our goals every day and everything got done. Parts got out on time. We didn't make bad parts. Our quality was up to par. You'd have to deal with human resource issues, labor. It was a United Auto Workers plant, so you had a lot of labor issues. And my boss would come in. He said, "Man," he said, "I don't know how you do it." He said, You sit in here and you're on your computer playing around, and sometimes you're watching TV in the lunchroom. He says, but your department runs 25% of the black, which is like 20% ahead of every other department. He said, I don't know how you do it. You know how I did it? I asked the workers, I said, what's the best way to run this department? And they will tell you, they'll say, let's do this, let's do that, let's move this over here. We ship the parts out of the East End. Well, let's start making them on the West End so we can have a nice streamlined system. And they will tell you in every department the best way to run that department. And if you ask them, well, how can you guys work together? And nobody ever did that before. They'd always tell them, this is what we're doing and this is how we always did it, and they were so appreciative of that. I said, I just need to be 20+% of the black every day and no issues. And they say, okay, boss, if we need you, we'll come get you. We know where to find you. And I said, this is really something. I mean, and that's what a worker co-op is. The people that do the job know better than the 12 layers of management, between the worker, and the CEO of the company. I mean, you don't need, the company I was at, you had, first you had team leaders who were in the union, then you had frontline supervisors, you had production managers, then you had area managers, then you had assistant plant manager, then you had a plant manager, then you had a VP of production. So, I mean, there's like 8 or 10 levels before you actually get up to the president of the company.
Right.
And I mean, and it makes no sense because 9 of those levels really don't need to exist.
Yeah.
So I think, in worker co-ops, what they've done is they've eliminated that.
Yeah. Well, and what shows
a lot of
salaries.
Yeah.
What shows how bad this design is that there's an entire TV show called Undercover Boss that's actually entertaining because CEOs have to do the real jobs of their company.
How about that? Yeah.
And they always suck at it. And it's like evidence that they're so abstracted and disconnected from the work that happens. It doesn't mean that it's bad for executive level or C-level people to look at the macroeconomics, to understand systems, to be the figurehead, to promote the company, right? Those things are fine. Is it fine though that they're so disconnected from the lives of their workers and the fundamentals of their business that if you threw them in the line or you put them anywhere near the actual work that's happening, they wouldn't be able to do it? That's probably a problem, right? When you have that level of disconnect, like I said, where they're often making on average 370 times the amount that their workers make, there's a bad design here, right? And that's why we have a whole entertaining show about it. So there's a better way.
And worker co-ops, the best way you can say to someone who works somewhere is you can show them their worth by paying them a decent wage, and also by giving them the latitude to make decisions.
Right.
I remember a boss telling me one time, says, well, I'm not going to tell you how to do it. I don't pay you all this money for me to figure it out. He says, go figure it out, man. Whatever you want to do,
right.
Spend whatever money you have to spend. You know what time it is. I was like, oh, okay, I'll fix it. But
so decentralize that, remove the layers of abstraction. You've got the same system running, but where the workers get paid even more fairly.
Right. And by the way, there are about 465 worker co-ops in the United States. Most of them are smaller companies with less than 50 employees, but the concept seems to be taking off because just about all of those companies are profitable companies, and they seem to work just fine, and they have much less turnover, than other companies.
But truly invest
in their field
more in the company. It's part of their company.
Yes, it's their company. You're right. It is their company. So it's a little different, when you're working for yourself rather than you're working for somebody else. And it's a little different when you're getting the fruits of your labor rather than, and some of the salaries, not even at the top of the chain. Where I worked, it was an automotive manufacturing plant. And the name of the game was to become an area manager, because area manager, your yearly bonus, you could basically pay your house off with it. You could, so everybody, once they got there, you kind of like, you're good to go. But worker co-ops are something I think we'll be hearing more about, and I think you're going to see more of them because unions are kind of making a comeback. But I think, like everything else, unions are evolving, and workers' rights organizations are evolving.
Mhm.
And one of the things they're evolving into is worker co-ops. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. A DAO is an organization represented by rules. These rules are encoded as a computer program that is transparent, controlled by the organization members, and not influenced by a central governing body. So, Alex, what does that mean in everyday talk? What does that mean to everybody? What does that mean?
It's the digital worker co-op, right? It's
Okay.
because you think about what a worker co-op is, and it's essentially a decentralized company, right? There's no central point of power or wealth accumulation, right? When you're building wealth in the company, you're building your own units of wealth because it's part of it's part of your company. In a DAO, this is the same thing. It's just decentralized. And so digital, right? And so all of the workers are contributors to the project, and they have the same voting rights and the same engagement and ownership over this organization. And there isn't one person or one group in the middle that's running it. It's essentially a company. In fact, Wyoming now, you can register a DAO, and it's an extension of the LLC registration. So you're registering an LLC, but you're registering a DAO LLC. So it's a company, as the government sees it at this point, because of course they can tax a company, but it's a decentralized, it's a worker co-op, right? And everybody's contributing code or whatever's needed for the specific type of DAO. So for example, I was part of a thing called Pizza DAO, and Pizza DAO was, or still is, a DAO that wanted to give out free pizza on Bitcoin Pizza Day. And Bitcoin Pizza Day, for those who don't know, there's like this guy a long time ago who spent his Bitcoin on pizza as a proof of concept to show that you could buy pizza with Bitcoin. And the Bitcoin that he spent on the pizza would probably be like tens of millions of dollars at this point. He got 2 large pizzas. And every year on that date, people celebrate Bitcoin Pizza Day in remembrance of this dude who bought pizza with his Bitcoin. So what we wanted to do is give out free pizza on Bitcoin Pizza Day by raising money through the sale of NFTs that artists contributed to the DAO, and then use the proceeds from those NFTs to pay for all of the free pizza that people would show us proof of purchase with, and then we would reimburse them. And so with that, we raised close to $1 million. And around the world, in tons of different countries, we had people posting about their celebration of Bitcoin Pizza Day with our free pizza, and it was extremely successful. And there's maybe 100 of us that all contributed. There's some artists, there was software developers, there were people who were posting about it. I was posting about it on social media. Everybody had like different jobs in the pizza mafia, and there wasn't like one person or one group in the middle making all the decisions. It was very much a group effort, and it was extremely successful. And that's like a really good example of, it's very fun. It's not like a super serious company, but it raised a good amount of money, even with it being somewhat of a joke. and it supported
and think about this
all over the world.
And think about this, through the raising of funds through the NFTs. Suppose you didn't want to give away free pizza and said, let's just split the money up. Everybody walked away with a nice little chunk of money.
If everybody agreed to that, it would
everybody agreed to that, which they probably wouldn't, but I'm just saying that a DAO can function as a money-making enterprise.
Right.
It can function as a nonprofit, so to speak.
Yeah.
It can function it has more flexibility and it can function in a number of ways different than say an LLC or a sole proprietorship or something like that.
Right.
And I think what really sets it apart is that the people, kind of like with the worker co-ops, the people make the decisions on what to do with the money. And you guys decided to give away free pizza, which I think is a noble thing to do.
Yeah. And we supported tons of pizza restaurants around the world in the process. You know?
I mean, I rode my bike today, man. I could use a free pizza right about now, but we'll talk about that later. Okay, moving right along. I think we would be remiss in the decentralized universe, the DeFi universe, if we didn't talk about Facebook. Facebook, I guess, is really getting a much higher level of scrutiny than they've gotten before, because I think, Mark Zuckerberg's worst nightmare is starting to come true, is that the senators and Congress people are starting to really understand what he's doing, which he didn't have that problem before. They're talking about some antitrust violations. So they may even try to split Facebook up, but because of the nature of surveillance capitalism and data analytics and some other things, it might be a little too late for that. Because, they, some are very reluctant to take on Facebook because of the perception of them that might show up on Facebook. There's today they found out that he's sending news stories to everyone's feed about what a nice guy he is and what a good job Facebook has done and how they're really trying to protect your privacy.
Just wants to bring everybody together, right?
Yeah, he just wants everybody to be friends, which
The place for friends.
Yeah, the adage about a bridge in Brooklyn, if you believe that, So someone sent an email in and says, tell us, you guys talked about surveillance capitalism. Is Facebook out of control? Is it too late to rein Facebook in? What do you think, Alex?
I don't think it's too late to rein it in. Is it out of control? Yeah. I mean, I think it's not the only one, but it's one of the largest, right?
Right.
I mean, every time I open certain games, now that Apple has forced you security improvements where an app has to request your permission to use your data outside of the app. The way they frame it is interesting to see. Like every time I open Words with Friends, Words with Friends reminds me that it's a free app. And the way that it stays free is by using my data. And the way they frame it is like, it's not super clear on how they do that. It's like basically like, if you want this to stay free, click here. Allow us, we use this for really how we make money so that we don't have to charge you. It's almost like a threat, right? It's a veiled threat of like, if you don't let us use your data elsewhere outside of the app and sell it, then we have to charge you now, right? And so they're almost like threatening it. And so this is a lot of companies, obviously, that are built on this model, but Facebook has a very serious manipulation or a very serious impact on public discourse.
Also,
and opinion.
Yeah, also it came out last week that Instagram is responsible for a lot of young ladies committing suicide. And this is actually a study that Facebook owns Instagram, by the way, and also WhatsApp. So this was a study that was actually done by Instagram, done by Facebook, and they kind of found this out and they kind of, shoved it under the pile, but somehow I guess it got divulged. But they see a lot of young ladies, mostly preteens and teens, felt like they could never measure up to the perfect people that they see on Instagram, which are not really perfect. They use all kind of filters to make them look perfect, and they create this. But if you're good at it, you can make millions of dollars,
Right.
And a lot of the young ladies that didn't quite measure up, there have been some suicides from, Instagram related because they didn't feel they could measure up. And does Facebook bear some responsibility for that?
Yeah,
Knowing that they know about it. Yeah,
you know that they do. They know that they do because they're constantly. So I have a pretty large food Instagram account, and I'm trying to see if I still have it. But for a while, it's back. But for a while, my like counts were hidden. I could not see how many likes other people's posts got. I could still see how many mine got. But they did this huge rollout in Canada first, and then the US, to turn off the like count for people so that they couldn't see how many likes other people were getting, because they know, and they wanted to stop having this impact on people's lives, but they knew that especially younger people on the app would compare themselves to the clout of other people, most fake people. And the thing is, people can buy likes, they can edit their body shape, they can do all sorts of things.
They can use a picture that's not even them.
Right, use pictures that aren't them, put their face on it. You know what I mean? Like, you can literally go into Facetune and shape your body into that hourglass shape with a few clicks. I mean, the reality is that your skin, your body shape, how many likes you get, all of these things are manipulatable to the people who know how to do it and who have built brands around it. And for the people who judge themselves against that, that's not fair, right? Especially at that age, for kids to be comparing themselves to each other over clout. It was hard enough before that, So Instagram and Facebook obviously feel guilt about it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be trying to fix it at all, right? Why would they try to fix it if they didn't feel somewhat responsible for the fact that kids are killing themselves?
But they know, they've done a study that told them that, and they know that.
They know it. Yeah.
For instance, let's talk a little bit about how surveillance capitalism and data analytics and AI and machine learning work. These companies will they look on your profile, they extract data a number of different ways. If you have a Samsung TV, I think it is, it kind of can listen to you. So there's a number of different ways that they can extract data. And I know the iPhone listens to you because you can talk about buying something. And I guarantee you within 2 or 3 hours, you'll start getting ads. And it's almost like they're reading your thoughts, which is not too far-fetched. As a matter of fact, Zuckerberg's working on that now. But what they do is they extract data points. For instance, when you post pictures, things that may make you happy, things that may make you sad, things that may make you fearful, things that you're attracted to, things you're repulsed by. And what they found out is that people typically, they make money on engagement, because the more engagement, the more they can charge for ads, So it doesn't matter to them how they get engagement. It's like, if you're riding down a highway and you see, a cop helping an elderly person change a tire, you say, "Oh, God, great cop," and you just keep riding. But if you're riding on a highway, you see a wreck with bodies laying all over the side of the road, everybody wants to stop and look. Well, the same thing with Facebook. People respond more to negative posts than they do to positive posts. And because of AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, the algorithms that they have written say, hey, you know what? People respond to negative posts more than positive posts. So let's send all the police officers posts about Black Lives Matter and Antifa. And let's send all the minorities posts about police beating up people. And we'll get more engagement, and it's not something that they try to do. It's just that the algorithm tells them through artificial intelligence, machine learning, if Robert responds more to this, send him more of that. If Alex responds more to this, then I got a lot on ribs because I love ribs, so I was researching barbecue ribs, like how to cook the best ribs, how to do this and all that. And all of a sudden I start getting all this stuff about ribs, Now, on the other hand, some things that I don't like, if you show distaste by your response, you get more things like that.
Right.
So what happens is that people, and I'll give you a good example. We talked about this, I think, a couple of weeks ago about, last summer, you had Black Lives Matter protests, in areas where there are no Black people. Like I had a friend from New Zealand said, yeah, well, I'm going to a Black Lives Matter protest. I said, there's no Black people there. So what are you guys protesting?
Well, yeah, like we were talking about, you got Trump supporters, Trump supporters in countries that Trump doesn't even know, couldn't even point out on a map, right? And
I mean, I know, man, I know.
I mean, how does it happen other than algorithmic corralling of public opinion, right? And I think you're right. It happens. These are really specific examples. But let's say you've got a specific news article post or a news article that references an ongoing event that Facebook's algorithm has grouped all of the news articles about it into the same bucket. Okay, so you have a bucket of all the news articles about event X. Okay, and you have all of the news articles about event Y, and suddenly people are starting to interact with both stories. And let's say one's a positive story or like a boring story, according to how humans naturally react to things, right? And one's a riveting story that gets people riled up. There's a strong visceral or emotional reaction to that story. And so all of a sudden you start seeing the clicks, right? You start seeing the clicks, who's interacting with it, what are the types of reactions to it? Is it just regular likes or is it like the more emotive likes? Is it hearts? Is it laugh crying emoji? Is it sad emoji? Is it angry emoji, right? They have different weights to every single data point, okay? And they know all of your emotions already and what gets you riled up, because every time you use Facebook Messenger to call, they can measure the emotions on your face by subtle wrinkles. I mean, this is the level of this is
not just, folks. We're not making this up. You can
like say this. You do a call, a video call.
This,
It knows exactly how you're feeling in the call based on your voice and your facial expressions. It knows where you are based on the objects that are identifiable behind you. So it knows if you're home, if you're outside, if you're at somebody else's house, and it recognizes whose houses those are based on the geodata that you've agreed to provide to it. It knows where you are. It knows how you're feeling. And so all of those things are already present in the algorithm. And then you start reacting to a type of story, and then it starts hitting you with that. Now magnify that by every minute of all of your days together. Okay, so you're constantly getting hit with the same thing over and over and over again because you reacted strongly. It already knows how you feel about it. It already knows how you feel in general in life. And so it's constantly manipulating that, not because it wants to make your life miserable or destroy you, but because the need for profit, which Facebook makes off of you staying on the site longer and more passionately,
more engagement,
that outweighs your quality of life. It's not that they want you to have a bad quality of life. It's just that the profit for them is the only concern. And if they can keep you alive long enough to engage with that every single day of your life, then they're going to make a ton more money if you just see a bunch of okay stories that you kind of half react to. And that's the difference, because they have to figure out every single detail to keep you there longer and fight for your attention.
There's also something involved called contagion. And if you want to do some research, look up contagion experiments. What contagion is that they can actually group people together and they can transfer your emotions to me. They can make me really pissed off, and they can say, show up in Washington on January 6th, and we're going to take this country back. And you get inundated with this every time you turn on the computer. It's not just Facebook, it's Google, it's WhatsApp, it's Instagram. And then there are a lot of other sites or social media sites that do the same thing. Facebook just happens to be the biggest, and this is worldwide. So, they can actually take the way I feel and make Alex feel the same way. Not just believe the same things, but have the same emotion. That's why it's called contagion.
Right.
And they've become very astute at being able to do this with large groups of people.
Yeah.
And that's why, as we talked before, where you had, Trump supporters in where was it, Denmark or someplace where and you had Black Lives Matter protests in New Zealand where there's no black people,
Yeah.
and that's what a worldwide, contagion you know, data, AI, machine learning. That's what it can do.
Right.
We
And
talked about
this is
Brexit.
the problem.
Talk a little bit about Brexit too.
Yeah, Brexit. Well, a lot of people don't realize that Cambridge Analytica wasn't just about our election, but it was also about the entire Brexit situation. And I strongly recommend watching The Great Hack on Netflix. It's a wonderful documentary that it interviews people who were a part of Cambridge Analytica and a part of what happened, who are like, we really messed things up. But there's a human element, and then there's a algorithmic or program element. Okay. And as people, this is the difference, because AI and machine learning aren't sentient yet, right? They're not making human-like decisions where you weigh the nuance and context of a situation and make a better decision. They're constantly seeking efficiency or seeking some programmed goal that they have to reach, right? Make money. So when the January 6th example, well, imagine I'm an algorithm, I'm not a person, and I have no context as far as like what this means. All I know as an algorithm is that certain groups of people become extremely susceptible to it, or not even susceptible, because that's an emotive word that humans use, right? They become extremely engaged in this idea. Let's say in this case, an election was stolen. Okay, so they become extremely engaged in this idea. And so I know that they really engage with that over any real information about a real election. They don't care about the actual details of the election. They care about the stuff that gets them angry about it being stolen. As an algorithm, I don't know what that means. I just know that this bucket of information is more engaging to them than this bucket of information. And I know the other qualities of those people that they may share. This is where contagion comes in. Then they may share with others who haven't gotten engaged in that bucket yet. So how do I move that bucket of engagement that some people with qualities are already engaging in and others aren't? Well, I start showing it to others over and over and over again, and until they start engaging with it. And now you have this transfer of emotion, right? Well, then how does that progress from like people thinking it's a stolen election? They genuinely think that. It's not like, I mean, their reality is that they think that's what happened.
In their mind,
because it's all, their whole world is in this timeline, right, of information that's been catered to them with the assumption that that's true. So then they start figuring out what they should do about it. So they make Facebook groups. A couple of real strong leaders in that group are like, we need to do something about this. So they start forming some groups. Well, there's already some alt-right existing groups in the real world who are like, well, this is huge. People are really interested in getting our t-shirts all of a sudden. So then there's tons of people joining their groups. Oh. Well, now like the president himself has like come out and basically like encourage them from all these different angles. So there's all these real world things happening. And then all of this driving of people to make real decisions is happening on social media, where they're organizing around an entire delusion that was fed to them algorithmically, because the algorithm isn't a human, doesn't understand the implications of what's going to happen when a bunch of people show up in a Capitol on January 6th to take their country back, right? And it's not framed like, do you want to be a terrorist on January 6th? Or like, do you want to do something terrible on January 6th? It's framed like, do you want to take your country back on January 6th?
You want to be a hero.
Fight for your freedom, right?
And see, they were manipulated too by the puppet masters.
Right.
So you don't keep that in mind. They were manipulated too by the puppet masters.
And so you have people in the real world that are driving the narrative. And then you have social media algorithms that aren't humans, that don't understand the implications, that are creating the perfect environments for them to fester and become more extreme, right?
Yeah. And then you have owners of social media who really don't want to stop it, because the crazier it gets, the more money they make.
Make a ton of money, yeah.
The crazier it gets, the more money they make.
Yep.
I can, I'm not going to say that, but I could see some owner of a social media company says, well, they've taken over the country. Oh, our numbers are through the roof.
Well, that's how QAnon happened. A lot of people don't realize QAnon's been figured out. Like, they already know who's behind QAnon. And QAnon started in message boards like 4chan and Akoon. And what happened is this guy who already owns a bunch of like right-wing media organizations, who wasn't doing super well financially and had to leave the country because of other legal troubles. He ended up in Thailand, but he started
of all places,
of all places,
yeah.
a nice safe haven for him. But he started noticing on 4chan and Akoon that people were, they've always had anon stories. And the whole idea of anon stories online was like, who can make up the crazier story about a non-member in the FBI or some government agency. Q started just like any of those other prose contests between incels on the internet. Okay. And what he noticed though, that this one was getting a lot of extra writing. People were writing a ton about it. So he's like, we need to make a whole special forum for this. So he like continued doing it. The ad revenue was through the roof. They were suddenly like going from barely making it as to pay for their servers to making a profit on QAnon. And so all the servers have been traced back. He put up these .pub websites for QAnon to pretend to be Q so he could keep it going and make tons more money on the ad revenue on these sites. So QAnon was born out of this exact business model of like, this gets people really riled up, even though it's fake. I might as well expand it and keep making money off of it. And he probably has, at this point, he's made so much money off of this. He's probably has a whole
and he has some of the things that are the most bizarre, ridiculous things that you could ever imagine, like Hillary Clinton's eating babies in a pizza parlor.
It doesn't even have a base. They said it was like in the basement of this pizza parlor.
And this guy actually went there with weapons to stop her from eating the babies in the pizza parlor. I mean, it's funny, but it ain't, This guy actually got arrested at the pizza parlor with weapons because he was going to free the babies that Hillary Clinton was eating in the basement.
Yep.
Yeah.
Comet Pizza. Yeah, it was a ping pong pizza bar that apparently they thought was like the headquarters of the world pedophile ring and the baby eating elite.
Wow. I mean, that makes you a pretty bad. You're not just a bad, it's like a Charles Dickens person. When you're bad, man, you're smoking, drinking, cussing, and gambling all at the same time. You're like an awful person.
But that it's a perfect example of how this happens, because there's people who, even though it's already been debunked, they've already shown how QAnon happened. There's people who still believe, they're still buying the shirts, they're still waving the flags at rallies. They still believe the narrative, even though it's already been debunked objectively. Right. You can trace servers back to see who owns them, and none of them have ever remotely even worked near the government, let alone in it.
So what do you think? What's at the root of this? I mean, there's obviously a need, or some psychological need, or something that's going on, or is social media really that powerful in manipulating people to believe these things?
It's both. I mean, conspiracy theories always thrive in moments of uncertainty, right? In moments of uncertainty, of economic uncertainty, of cultural uncertainty, conspiracy theories thrive. And this has been very historic, right? Historically, there actually have been quite a few times throughout history where conspiracy theories became mainstream. We're just not old enough, most of us, to remember those times, right? When I was growing up, the worst was like, 9/11 was an inside job, or like things like that. And it was very niche, or like aliens, right? Like government's hiding aliens. It was like very niche things that weren't like mainstream.
The lizard. So who are the lizard people? Are they real or?
Right. There's like people who have like actual breakdown of like the different types of lizard people that there are. And like, I mean, it's amazing. But what has really happened politically is the overlap of conspiracy theory with political ideology, with entire halves of the political landscape. And this is particularly dangerous because the internet and social media and these algorithms have driven that overlap, and the party leaders, the politicians have done anything but quell that, right? They've done anything but squash that overlap because it drives more people to their party. That extremism drives more people to donate and to get them elected and for them to speak to, right? Via Twitter. And so, they're paying for all of their budgets going towards advertising and social media. I mean, everything's being driven by social media.
Mm-hmm.
And the social media companies are making a ton of money. The politicians and the people paying for advertising have agendas that are profiting very wildly from this. And the people who are really getting hurt are the people who genuinely believe these things. And they don't know which way is up because the only source of information they have is the internet. And their entire experience on the internet is catered towards their existing biases.
Right. And that's what they get fed 24/7. And every time they turn on the news, every time they go to the internet, that's what they get fed. That's what comes through their feed. Decentralized social media.
Bingo. Yeah.
Tell us what that is, Alex.
The idea is that if you have a social media platform that isn't run by people in the middle, that have an inherent business model that goes against your best experience or your healthiest online experience, if you own your social media, you own your own data, you own your own experience, it's all very transparent. Perhaps it's decentralized to the point where everybody can vote and participate on how it's run or like what the rules are, right? What do you do about this specific type of content or etc. That is a much more ideal scenario than what we have now, which is black box algorithms that are super hidden and that run to the benefit of the centralized people in control and not to the benefit of the users.
Right. And what drives this is ad revenue. It's driven by money. One of the things that we talk about in terms of capitalism is that the purpose in capitalism is to make money, as much money as you can. And I think what happens a lot of times is that, and we know this, I mean, people, I don't know how many millions of people throughout history have compromised their principles to make more money, and I think because the ad revenue is because, not only there's a different type of advertising with social media. Not only can they, give me an ad of something they know I'll buy, they can actually place me in that place to buy it at a certain time. And they can know when I've got money to buy it. They can know that tomorrow's my wife's birthday and she's been looking at this leather coat. Yeah. And then they can know when I'm out at the mall that I may get something on my phone saying, hey, they got 45% off this coat until 9 p.m. And, they know I got paid yesterday and I'm doing some shopping for a birthday. I mean, there's a pretty high likelihood that I'll buy that coat. And when you can sell certainty, this is what Shoshana Zuboff always talks about. Mm-hmm. It's not, I ain't talking about creating robots. You can sell certainty. Not only, I know Alex likes black pickup trucks, and I know he's looking for a Ford F-150, and I know that he's going to come into some money, and I know that he's got a great credit score, and I know he's going to be driving down the street. So I guarantee you, if you send him a $4,500 off sticker on his phone, he's going to come in and buy that car.
Right.
And, with geo mapping, that's, when you're near someplace, you may get an ad on your phone, they're selling certainty, and there's a high, it's beyond advertising. There's a high chance, a great chance that, Alex, he's going to get this black pickup and we can make him get it on Saturday. How much is that worth to you?
Yeah. People have to realize advertising now is more than you just seeing something, right? Mm-hmm. Advertising is psychological. Mm-hmm. It's psychological manipulation. Mm-hmm. It's the layout of your life. It's your every interaction you have, every movie you watch. I mean, people don't realize the tens of millions of dollars that are spent in each movie on ad placement. of who's holding a Heineken, what type of car is the yellow bee or whatever in, I forget which comic movie. You know, like who's eating Pizza Hut? You know, it's in Wayne's World when they're they're like eating snacks. You know, they've got the Doritos bag, that famous scene of them eating even right now. I'm like, oh, that Wayne's World movie from decades ago, the Doritos bag, right? I mean, companies will pay a ridiculous amount of money, whether it's Pepsi or Coca-Cola or whatever, car companies, whatever the case may be, a type of speaker. and it's these subliminal things, but it's not just subliminal things, because there's a behavioral element of like, if we have all the subliminal things and we have the behavioral element and we can predict your behavior, and not just that, but manipulate your behavior.
We can sell certainty. We're certain.
Right.
Alex is going to be out tomorrow. He'll buy this jacket. I guarantee you.
There's metrics. There's metrics
on money. He'll buy this jacket. Yeah.
Metrics on the whole thing. They have customer funnel. I've seen the software because I've seen it in tech companies and websites. You can look at and drill down into the full customer funnel of every step along the way that's been laid out algorithmically of what drives a purchase, right? I mean, this is something that every company that makes money on you being a person, they all look at this, and they have people whose full-time job is to, you know, all these people, their job is only to look through these funnels and figure out where customers fall off and run tests to figure out how to keep them on track, even if it's just a few. So,
and some of the information that's available on some of these sites, I looked in a couple of them that were sales, you know, they were the track sales, and, you know, and some of the information that's available is like really, I mean, it's really, really personal, you know.
Yeah.
It gets down to the person's, you know, you can look up I had this one where you can look up an address, tells you the person's race, their political persuasion, what their favorite colors are. I mean, this is like information that anybody can get if they purchase it.
Oh yeah, it's just the publicly, that's just the publicly
I mean, I'm like,
information.
You know,
they can scrape your nicknames, they can scrape your closest acquaintances, they can scrape your like nearest family members and their nicknames. Like that's just publicly scrapable information of companies that don't even have a direct API access to your social media accounts.
That's right. That's right. And you know, it's funny because I say about I want to say 2003, 2002, 2003, maybe almost 20 years ago. I knew this guy, and he lived in this gorgeous house in Pepper Pike, Ohio. I mean, gorgeous house, Olympic-sized swimming pool, marble. And he used to get these $150,000 cars. And I said, what the hell do you do, man? Because it would never work. He says, oh, he says, I sell information. He said, if you want a list of everybody in Montana, you know, that likes Coors beer, he says, I can give it to you. And he was doing this almost 20 years ago. And he was so far ahead of the game, you know, and I said, oh, what a cool job, man. You know, he says, it's just me and my computer. And he would, I don't know where he got his information from, but he was scraping it from somewhere. Yep. But he was way ahead of the game, and he would make a ton of money. I mean, he could give you a list on anything. I want all the, you know, all the Chinese transplant surgeons in California. You know, he could give you a list, you know. He'd say, let me work on it. Next day he'd have a list. I want all the people that bought Mercedes Benzes that lived in Hunting Valley in the last 12 years. I'm like, dude, I said, I don't know. And he would never really talk about it, but he made a ton of money doing it.
Yeah, purchases are public information, like large purchases are public information.
Right.
I mean, there's government transparency in terms of who owns deeds, who purchased what and what year. So you can look at houses and cars. You immediately know that about a person's just from their name, right? The date of birth. Then you start scraping social media profiles, and you get all of their interests, every page they've interacted with, everybody they follow on Instagram, every account they've tweeted before, who's in pictures with them, what types of drinks. You have Python scripts that can literally identify objects that are free, that all of this is free. So I can identify what type of beer people are holding in, like you can write a script that's probably just a few lines long that uses these free open source libraries and suddenly query a very specific thing like that and have a full report within an hour.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. So the only way you can have complete privacy is to go live in a cave in Montana. Don't tell anybody.
Yeah, I think people have to realize privacy is not, privacy is a construct, right? What is privacy? And I think what we have to care more about is protection. The reality is that your information is there now. The name of your Wi-Fi network, where you live, all of this stuff is there. But how do we protect people and how do we give people ownership over that information so that there aren't companies profiting off of it without their knowledge? Now, that's the important thing. And I think that's why we talk so much about decentralization, because decentralization shifts the paradigm where instead of people in the middle profiting off of you now own the whole thing. You as the people own the organization.
Own your life experience.
You own your life
experience and your data.
Right.
Yeah, that belongs to you.
You profit off of it if you want to. You don't even have to.
Right. Yeah. If somebody wants says, I'll give you X amount for your data and you want to do that deal, go ahead and do it.
Right.
And if you don't, you should have that choice to do that.
Yeah, you opt in, you get a little crypto in your wallet. Well, you know what I mean? Like those are the little decisions but you can make those decisions.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's really important. I think that autonomy is going to be super critical in the future.
Right. And I think one of the things I'm pleased is that all of our leaders, our political leaders, seem to be kind of understanding this a little more now. Yeah. That's why I'm glad to see some of the younger leaders, because some of the older ones, they don't really care to understand all this stuff.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the political leaders now, that's why they're going to try to break Facebook up. I guarantee you that's coming down the pike.
Yeah.
They finally realized what's going on, with a lot of things, with Facebook and Google. They understand that the power may have shifted from the oligarchs to the data guys. and from the politicians, the elected officials, to the data guys. So I think this is we live in it's sort of like the data revolution, and I think a lot of people now are starting to realize a lot of things that go on and have been going on for a long time. So decentralization helps remedy some of that because it reverses the flow of ownership. Right. Your data belongs to you, and you get to make the decision. Your finances, you decide how you invest your money. And maybe I got a project going where I'm going to make 100% in the next 12 months. And I can afford to pay you 30% on your money. I need X amount of money and I'll pay you 30%. We'll do a smart contract, on a blockchain where it's, it's verifiable and it's transparent, and you can keep track month to month of what's going on. Yeah. So I think, decentralized finance, DeFi, will play a part in reversing the flow of ownership, and also of, kind of putting power back to the people, so to speak.
Yeah. And I think that'll be perfect for us next week. We can maybe talk about social tokens in the metaverse, because you start blurring the lines of the digital and the physical. And then you start talking about how do you own? What does it look like to own things on the internet, right? And what does it especially mean for younger generations whose whole lives are on the internet, right? Right. How do you own things? Because right now we just imagine like I'm in a game and the game owns my stuff. Once I leave the game, I can't take my stuff with me, right? Thinking about the metaverse, thinking about social tokens, I think that'll be really interesting to carry this conversation on.
Yeah, it's sort of like intellectual property, only this is like digital property.
Yeah.
So it's a whole different concept of ownership, but it's still, it's like you create a character in a game that's really good. And maybe you want to take that character with you to the next game.
Maybe you want to put up a nice piece of art in your home in a game, and then you want to take the piece of art with you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Decorate the place.
Right. So we hope that we've enlightened some people, about what's going on with the decentralized finance. That's what we do, on the DeFi Collective. Our email is the deficollective@gmail.com. We encourage you, if there are any subjects you want to hear about, any questions you have, please reach out to us. But unfortunately, our time is up, but we do thank you for yours. And I'll still say it, wear your mask. Any closing thoughts, Alex?
I'm definitely it's about that time of year where I'm gonna have to start using my light again at this time. It's starting to get a little dark.
I know. Yeah.
But you guys, there's a beautiful sunset. So at least
I see it in the background, man. Yeah. Okay. All right.
You guys can get a.
Whoa. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty nice.
Okay.
But yeah, I'll start getting a light so I don't get.
I hear you. Okay. All right. Well, hey, we'll see you next week. And again, it's Robert Vaughn, Alex Jewell, the DeFi Collective, the DeFi Collective@gmail.com. Let us hear from you. And have a great week, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.